I hear with pleasure that our sun is moving rapidly in the direction of the constellation of Hercules, and I hope that men on this earth will in this matter emulate the sun. Hercules, son of shining Zeus, son of fair Alcmene, more god than man, the earth was too delicate for your feet. The earth could not contain you. Your destiny was to dance with the stars and dine in the halls of the immortals. You restored order to civilization when men were weak and monsters savaged the lands. You freed Prometheus from his shackles. You held the world on your shoulders. You stole the apples of life. You taught us to overcome mankind and showed man what it is to live as a god. You showed us how far the arrows of longing can fly, and for that you are immortalized in the stars. When the flood passed, Deucalion strode among the foundations of a new world, imparting the wisdom of his father upon the people. A new dawn smiled upon mankind. Some had survived the flood in caves atop high mountains, and they, together with the inhabitants of the Ark, repopulated the earth. But in time, civilization became decadent again, and men became weak. The descendants of Cain prevailed over the descendants of Abel and Seth, and the institutions which once protected the people now tyrannized over them. Monsters crept in from the edges of civilization, threatening to swallow it, and there were no men strong or brave enough to fend them off. But Zeus, watching from on high, took pity on mankind and imparted a divine child upon white-armed Alcmene, granddaughter of Perseus. Hercules, when you were just an infant, jealous Hera sent 2 serpents to strangle the life from you and choke you with their venom. But you grabbed each by the throat, as one day you would the Hydra, and crushed them in your tiny hands. I name these 2 serpents Fate and Destiny, you said in your infant voice, which babbled sweetly like the Styx, and I shall trample them under my feet. As you grew, you were trained by the best teachers in the arts of war and culture. Like Abel with his flock, you strode among the people, defending them from beasts and tyrants alike with your mighty club. But Hercules, your divine strength was also a curse, and Hera, seeing your success as a hero, enchanted you with a divine madness. As you looked upon your trembling hands, stained with the blood of your own children, you remembered all the friends and mentors who had come to harm at your hands, and you felt yourself beyond redemption. Guilt and shame, like venom, made your limbs stiff and your heart heavy. For the sin of the slaughter of your family, the oracle at Delphi bade you serve your wicked brother, a son of Cain, and carry out every order he commanded. Thus began your great labor, your agony, and your triumph. Your feats are too many to list: the Nemean lion, the Lernaean hydra, the Aegean stables, the Cretan bull. Everywhere you tamed beasts and slew monsters with your godlike strength. But your final 2 labors were the most inhuman of all: a tremendous ascent to the heights, and a terrible descent into the depths. As you scaled the jagged cliffs of Olympus to seek out the wisdom of Prometheus, you remembered the great deeds of your youth, but also the trail of destruction you had left in your wake. You smashed Prometheus's chains with your club, and shot Zeus's eagle from the sky with your far-reaching bow. You now possess the divine fire, said Prometheus, the white sun dancing in his shining locks. One day man shall pluck the apples of life, and man, he that was once a worm of the earth, shall become a god. I have foreseen this, but it is not yet time. Eden's gate still lies closed to man, blocked off by a great fire, and only the hand of an immortal can touch the fruit of life. Hercules, as you struggled up the snowy climbs of Mount Atlas, holding your lion skin tight about you to shield yourself from the Hyperborean wind, you remembered how it all began, how from the cradle you were destined for greatness. "This is my fate," you said into the blinding snow. "This is my destiny," you said into the white sun. And as you beheld the serpent, Ladon, winding its way about the tree of life atop Mount Atlas, you remembered how, even as an infant, Hera's serpents could not kill you. You took the heavens from Atlas's bronze shoulders, and his immortal hand plucked the golden apples for you. And you would have remained there, forgotten in the north, if it were not for the guidance of Prometheus. With his clever words in your mouth, you tricked Atlas into taking back the burden of the heavens, and left with your golden prize. For your final labor, you descended into the underworld and dragged the guard dog of Hades up to the light. You conquered death and grasped immortality, and you would have lived the happy life of a hero if it were not for the life-haters. These sons of Cain schemed against you, for they saw that you were the most mighty of all the lineage of Abel, and they hated you for your greatness. They poisoned you with the venom of the Hydra, and as your blood boiled and you bellowed in agony, you leapt upon the sacrificial fire which you had prepared for Zeus, and made it your own funeral pyre. And as you burned, you cried out to the heavens, "Destiny and fate, these are the chains which bind me, these are the wings which carry me to greatness. Now I am like Prometheus, and Zeus's eagle takes its sacrifice from me for my transgressions, but my sin is justified. In this divine fire, my sin is justified." And thus Hercules became a god. Hercules exemplifies a higher type of man, courageous, careless, mocking, a man who, as Nietzsche writes, has organized the chaos of his passions, given style to his character, and become creative. Hercules is the opposite of the modern man, his shadow. He is unrestrained, a man of instinct, overflowing with primal energy, the classical version of Giga Chad, if you will. Hercules is a civilized beast, but a barely civilized one, and because of this, he leaves a trail of destruction in his wake. This is why, as Nietzsche said, the higher man must organize the chaos of his passions. Nietzsche contrasted the higher man who seeks to harness the instincts in service of his creative will with the priestly practice of asceticism, in which life turns against itself. The ascetic seeks to cauterize his instincts and cut out the very root of life, while the higher man embraces them as the primal fountain of life which drives all living things to seek out challenge and resistance. Many vitalizing ascetic practices are being revived in modernity. The disciplines of lifting, fasting, meditation, cold showers, and abstinence. But often, practices like abstinence prove ineffective for the modern man. He becomes caught in a constant cycle of abstinence and indulgence. This is because the modern man is not in touch with the instincts which he seeks to harness in the first place. Modern man suffers from a chronic disconnect from his natural instinct, and thus his attempt at ascetic practice often end up being of the priestly type, only alienating him further from the instincts which should guide him and give him power. To renew civilization, we do not need men of the priestly type. We need men of the warrior type with an excess of energy, men ready for challenge and danger, in harmony with their instincts, even at the danger of being overcome by them. We must reconnect with the primal well of life before we can channel it. We must free the minotaurs of our passions before we can tame them. Or, as Nietzsche wrote, "Of all evil I deem you capable, therefore I want good from you. Verily, I have often laughed at the weaklings who thought themselves good because they had no claws. Hydra, one of Hercules' most well-remembered labors, perfectly symbolizes the problem we face in modernity. Every time one of the Hydra's heads is severed, two more take its place. It is only by cutting off the Hydra's main head that it can be conquered. Amid its jungle of heads, our Hydra, at its core, is what Nietzsche called the spirit of gravity. It is poor health, weakness of will, apathy, decadence, and entropic malaise hanging over our civilization, all symptoms of life in decline. A modern man may slay the demon of video game addiction only to fall prey to social media, or worse. And if he can slay the numerous digital addictions which are each capable of swallowing a man, then he may fall prey to the plastics and chemicals in our food and clothing, poor diet, pharmaceutical addiction, or any number of other pitfalls. For the task of slaying our Hydra, a breed of great men must arise. Men of the type that Hercules was, demigods and monster slayers. Our species senses the need for these types. There is a biological and spiritual imperative for a higher type of man who can thrive despite the perils of modernity, who can retain his health even in the most toxic conditions. There is something in life which craves overcoming, which craves freedom, which needs the clear and fresh air of the Olympian heights of excellence and striving. And it is this need which will call a new generation of half-gods to take on the challenge of modernity. Previously, we have talked about how Nietzsche understood the Prometheus myth as a justification of human evil, and thus the antithesis of the Christian concept of original sin, which lays a burden of guilt on all of humanity. In Birth of Tragedy, he writes, "What distinguishes the Greek notion is the sublime view of active sin as the characteristically Promethean virtue. With that, the ethical basis for pessimistic tragedy has been found, the justification of human evil, meaning both human guilt and the human suffering it entails. Hercules' labors are an endeavor to free himself from the guilt of his own violent nature. In Hercules, the destructive aspect of human nature is justified, and thus a return to the shame-free state of Eden is achieved. This is symbolized by Hercules' theft of the golden apples of immortality, and his eventual ascension to godhood after death. For, as outlined in Genesis, he who eats of the fruit of knowledge and the fruit of life becomes like a god. Hercules shows that not only can we return to the paradisal state of Eden, in harmony with the instincts and the will of life, but that we can also ascend even to godhood. By freeing Prometheus, Hercules symbolically takes his place as the new founder and symbol of civilization. Prometheus no longer has to pay the price for civilization, for it is now reconstituted by Hercules. Similarly, when Hercules momentarily takes the place of Atlas, he becomes the axis mundi, the very axis of the earth around which the heavens revolve. This symbolizes Hercules becoming the archetypal hero of the new age, the center of the divine drama laid out in the stars. But the hero's ascension to godhood must be preceded by a descent into the underworld. For, as Nietzsche writes in Thus Spake Zarathustra, it is the same with man as with the tree. The more he seeks to rise into the heights and light, the more vigorously do his roots struggle earthward, downward, into the dark and deep, into evil. The path to the higher man is not a simple path of ascent. It also requires a journey into the depths, into the inferno of the passions, into labyrinths of the human psyche long forgotten, where ancient minotaurs wander, into Hades, where subterranean beasts of instinct thirst for the light. If one wishes to ascend to the heights, he must first penetrate the depths. If one wishes to go over, he must also go under. Before we attempt any Apollonian discipline of the instincts, before we order the chaos of our passions, we modern men must first reconnect with the chaotic, violent, vitalizing frenzy of the instincts. Like Hercules, we must fix our arrows of longing upon the stars. Like Hercules, we must embrace our instincts and live passionately and boldly. Only then might we eat of the apples of life and live again in harmony with nature, each moment a pure expression of the primal life force. Only then might we live like gods. It is time for man to fix his goal. It is time for man to plant the seed of his highest hope. His soil is still rich enough for it, but that soil will one day be poor and exhausted, and no lofty tree will any longer be able to grow upon it. Alas, there comes a time when man will no longer be able to launch the arrow of his longing beyond man, and the string of his bow will have unlearned to whiz. I say to you, one must still have chaos in oneself to give birth to a dancing star. I say to you, you still have chaos in yourself.